Hi, in this video I want to demo a couple of tips how you can debug your Docker containers. First, let's go ahead and take a look at the log command in Docker. The log command will allow you to view the logs that a Docker container is actually producing, and seeing that a lot of applications do log certain output into files. This is coming in very handy when debugging your container. So to get started, I will show you real quick what my setup is for this demo. I am just simply running a Python script that loops through and just prints out a message, and the counter of the message increases every single time, so that I get first sending message number 1, number 2, number 3, and so forth. And I just put a 2-second timer on it to not continuously log, but to have enough frequency in it that it makes sense when I show the demo. The Docker file itself is very simple. I'm using an Alpine latest base container. I'm running an update. I'm installing Python 3. I'm creating an app directory. I'm changing my work directory to the newly created directory. I am copying my app.py file into the container, and as an entry point on my container, I'm running Python 3 and running the app.py. If you're wondering what the -u here means, the -u means an unbuffered output that allows me to actually print or log the message that I have in my print statement in here to the log, so I can actually see it when these containers are run in detached mode in this Python script, for example. Otherwise, this message will not show in the log. So this is just for demo purposes, but it's good to keep in mind and good to know. So let's go ahead and build the container and run it and see how we can access the logs. Okay, so now let's go ahead and build our image. Now it's a Docker build. We are in, or I have already switched into the directory my Docker file resides in. So we just put a dot in here. So Docker build, and then I want to tag my image as log demo, and I'll just make it version 1.0.0. Let's hit enter. Let's build our image, and then we will go ahead and run it. Great. Let me clear my screen. Okay. Let's go ahead and check. So here is my log demo. And now if I want to run it, Docker run, we will tell it to remove the container when the Docker container stops. When it is stopped, I want to run it in detached mode, and I want to give it a name, and I also will call it log demo, and then we will tell it to run our log demo version 1.0.0. And let's fire that container up. Let's take a look that the container really runs, and here it is, and we're good to go. So now how can you attach to the log, and how can you see the log actually? The easiest way to do this is simply by running a Docker logs, and then you can pass in the container ID or the container name. I will use the name log demo, and I hit enter, and here you see it prints out the contents of my log. At the time from start to now, there's 13 messages already. As you can sure imagine, there's more messages now, and if you want to see and trail the log, you can do that too, simply by running the same command and adding the F flag, -F. And if you do that, you will see it will actually follow your log, and it will trail it on your screen, and you can follow what's going on. This comes in very helpful if you, for example, run web applications in a Docker container or something to that extent, where you want to see when GET requests or posts are made, and you can trail them here and you can see what's going on in your application. Now let's stop this container. Let me go ahead and stop the container. And once then has stopped, there's one other thing I would like to show you when it comes to the logs. That is that the logs do stay with the container, meaning the container, when it's running, even when it's stopped, you still can access the logs, as long as the container has not been removed. When I started this first container run here, I did pass in the --rm flag, meaning remove the container when the container stops. If we're running our Docker run without that, so I'm just taking out the rm here, and I'm starting my container. We can take a look at it if you would like to. Can take a look. So there's now 3, 4, 5, and so forth. If I now stop my container, and once it has stopped, because I did not pass the --rm in, so the container still exists even though the container stopped, I can go ahead now and still take a look at docker logs log demo, and the logs are still there. So even if you have, for example, a container that you start running and it crashes and it stops running, as long as the container has not been removed, you still will be able to take a look at the logs. Next, let's go ahead and take a look at the attach command. So for this, I will use the same container I used before. So we'll just do a docker run. We'll run it in detached mode. Remove when the container stops. I want to give it a name. And we want to run our log demo version 1.0.0. Let's fire that container up. Container is running. Let's take a look. There it is. I can now run actually let's do this in, no, that's fine. We will go ahead and run now a docker attach log demo. Here too you can pass in either the container name or the container ID. And what this attach command allows me to do now is to stream the standard output. So the standard output from this container is now streamed here. I'm running it in detached mode. The problem with this command now is to detach from this container, I would need to stop it. And that would be the Control-C key combination, but that will automatically also stop my container. So if I'm going on here, and we do a docker ps, I have a second tab open, I do a docker ps, you see my container is running. If I'm going back, I want to detach from my standard out stream, and I hit Control-C, and I'm going back, and I'll check, and my container is gone. So the other way that you could, if you were just debugging your container, what you can do is you can go ahead and you run it in interactive mode, and I will not remove the container after it stops. So we just do a docker run interactive mode. I give it my name or a name, and we'll run this, and you see it's all printed out here. If I now go back to my second tab and I run a docker attach log demo, you will see that I can also now stream my standard out. To detach, when you're running a container in interactive mode, it is Control-P, Control-Q, and now you see I've detached from this container. I'm not streaming the standard out anymore, and if I go back, my container is still running. Now if I hit here Control-C, for example, I can see that now I left my container. I've closed and I've stopped the container. And now we can actually go back also to the docker log command, because if I can now run a docker logs log demo, I can actually see in my log here, oh, my container stopped running because I hit Control-C. So this is just to close that loop a little bit. But that's the docker attach command, also very helpful if you want to stream standard out and want to see what's going on. Now we can take a look at the exec command. The exec command allows us to actually execute arbitrary commands against the running container. So let's take a look at that. Now, because of the previous demo, I ran the container in detached mode, in interactive mode, and I did not remove the container. Firing the same container up again, running the same container again, will actually cause an error. So we need to clean up. And what we do is just a Docker container prune. And I'll say yes, remove all unused containers. I don't need that anymore. So now that we have done that, we can do a Docker run, detached mode, remove name log demo, and we want to run our log demo version 1.0.0. Okay, so now that we have this, and we maybe see in a log that there's a problem, and we have copied in a Python script that's executing our program. So our container is running right now. Taking a look, our container is running, and now I can actually execute an arbitrary command into this container to, for example, display the file that's being run. So I know it's app.py, so I can do a Docker exec. I give it then either the container ID or the name again. So I do a log demo, and then I just say cat app.py. And there is my script that is currently been executing, and I can take a look at the script and maybe determine where the problem is and make the change, rebuild the container and run it again to make sure everything is okay. However, this just goes to show that with the exec command, I can take an arbitrary command here and I can execute it against my Docker container and take a look at maybe a file or something else that I would like. Okay, let's stop our container. Docker stop log demo. This time I do not need to clean it up after, because I had my rm flag in here, --rm, to remove the container once it's being stopped. Another helpful tip to debug Docker containers is also to override the entry point. Going with my example that I set up for this demo, you see here that in my container I have defined the entry point as being Python 3 and running this application. So what does this entry point mean? That means when the container is being started, go ahead and execute whatever is defined in here. So in my case, run this app.py script. Now, there may be cases where you want to poke around in a container. You want to see what is actually in the container and maybe want to take a look around. So you can override this entry point when you start your Docker container. And the way you do that is Docker run in interactive mode. I will still pass my remove. And now it's a -- entry point, and in this case it's bin sh to get onto a shell prompt, depending on if it's an Alpine container, a Red Hat container, whatever else it may be. It might be slightly different. Nonetheless, in a container you can override the entry point, and then we want to give it the log demo 1.0.0. Have it enter, and now you see I'm actually on a command prompt. I can run my ls, I can take a look at here, I can run a cat, can take a look at that, can run my clear, I can take a look at whatever else I want. So now you can actually go ahead and browse around in your container, and you can find out where certain files are, if you may be referencing an incorrect file somewhere or something along these lines. So with overriding the entry point, that will give you access to the Docker container so that you can actually take a look inside and browse around like in a normal Linux system. To exit out of it, you just type exit and we're good. Let's make sure my Docker container is not running anymore. So we're good and clean, and we can move on. Sometimes it also may be that you have more than one Docker container running, and one container is maybe passing messages into another one, and this other container may be faulty. There may be errors, and you need to debug it, and you need to pause or stop the messages being sent. So in Docker, you can actually also run a pause command. So I can show you how you can pause a Docker container. Let me clear my screen. We do a Docker run. We run our Docker container. I'm using the same container as I've used before. We do a Docker rm name log demo, and we want to run our log demo version 1.0.0. Let's run the container. And now if I'm doing a Docker ps, I'm right here. I will open a second tab, and I will do a Docker logs log demo -f. Let's see that it is trailing my messages, which it does. And now here in my first tab, I will do a Docker, it's a Docker pause log demo. Now before I execute it, let's take a look with message 18, message 19, and I've paused my container, and you see my container has stopped actually logging messages to the log. Now let's go ahead and unpause it, and this is simply a Docker unpause log demo, and I've unpaused it, and if I go back, you see my messages will continue being logged to my log. So this is how you can pause a container. You do not stop it, so you don't lose any of the work that's in it. You just pause the running of it, and then you can, with the unpause command, you can continue running your container. So let's go ahead and close this. Control C, close this tab, and we do a Docker stop log demo. And once that's stopped, we can move on to my last tip. The last tip that I have that I frequently use is the inspect command. So the inspect command allows you to inspect a Docker image and get information about network connection, where the log files are, and so forth. So using exactly my same container as before, we do again a Docker run, detach mode, remove name, log demo, and we run the log demo version 1.0.0. If I run my container, and I will open a second tab, and I'm running now a Docker inspect log demo. Again, I'm using the container name, and we'll just do a less. And now here you see, I can see, for example, the ID of the container, when it was created, what path it is, what the args are that are passed into the path. This is what we had defined in the entry point. The current state it is running. It's not paused. I can see the image. There is a few things that one can take out of the Docker inspect to see what may be going on, if there may be something wrong in general with my Docker container in the setup. Another thing you can do is you can actually also then search for certain things. So let's just say, let's go back up a little bit, and I want to see when it was created, for example. So I can now, for example, run a docker inspect log demo, and I can just pipe it to grep, and what was it? Just created, and I can see here my Docker container, the image was created on this date at this time, and this is how you can also work your way through the docker inspect command if that is something that you find helpful. So to summarize a couple of tips that I've given in this demo to debug your Docker containers, and please let me know, I know these are not all the things that you can do to debug your Docker containers, but these are the easiest to apply, I believe, and these are the ones that you can use the quickest and the fastest. So first that we looked at was Docker logs, and you pass in the container name and the container ID that allows you to take a look at the logs. And then we looked at Docker attach. The command is Docker attach, and then you also pass in the container name and the ID that allows you to attach to the standard output of a container. Next, I did demo Docker exec, which allows you to execute arbitrary commands. So the command docker exec, you pass in container name or the container ID, and then you, for example, can pass in a cat command to take a look at the file or something along these lines. We overrode the entry point of a container so that we can actually enter the container when it's running on the command prompt, for example, and then start looking around where files are located and what else is in that container. We also did take a look at Docker pause and unpause, which allows you to pause a container without stopping it, perform maybe some work on another container that is communicating with this one, and then unpause it and resume the container and let it run. And lastly, I did show the docker inspect command that allows you to get detailed information about your container. You can get information from docker inspect output, like when the container was created, what the current status is. You can see where the log files are and so forth. Well, I hope you found this video helpful, and I would appreciate a thumbs up. If you would like to subscribe, please feel free to do so, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.